Hi, I'm Erin Larkin and I'm here with John Jens and we're doing part 2 of Australasia's Greatest Pinots. Now we've just done a snapshot of 10. There's a tasting happening in about an hour and a half with 20 Pinots in it. So we literally just chose 10 of them that we love after looking at them prior to coming on air, and this is our second 5. In no way second, but just the second 5, part 2. So, John, starting in glass number 1, we have the 2017 by Farr Tout Pinot. Now, Nick Farr has been obviously nominated for Gourmet Traveller's Winemaker of the Year. Congratulations, Nick. A huge win, even if who knows how it's going to go, but magnificent to be nominated and well done. So this is a Geelong Pinot, really distinctive from the others, I thought, when we were looking at these before we came on air.
Very, very definitely. So Gary Farr, Nick's dad, was a contemporary of mine in my year at Roseworthy, and he went on to make wine as many of the guys did. I went the other way and went into retail and more recently into restaurants, and I think he's loved what he's done and I've loved what I've done. And so on a few occasions in the past, when we've been doing our lineups of Australasia's Best Pinots, which we do at least once a year, sometimes more often, occasionally I haven't included any Geelong region Pinot Noirs. Do I cop some flack on social media? The people from Victoria really get stuck into me. They're a very unusual style to me, and they're also, they're to an extent dominated by the Farr family in its various versions. Although they have had some lovely and unusual Pinot styles over the years at Prince Albert and others down that way. And but serious. Gary's obviously spent a lot of time at Domaine Dujac, where the boys, or both the girls and the boys, will have gained extra knowledge and information from. Lean, long, dry, stark, ungiving at the moment, needs some time to come around, and specifically going in a different direction, I'll assume deliberately, to many of the other Pinot Noirs that we see in Australasia. And but just for context, Gary in the earlier days when he was at Bannockburn and where he was becoming a legend, he's a serious winemaker and a very, very good winemaker. Some of those Serres, the early ones that he made, were great Australian Pinot Noirs. They're amongst the greatest wines Australia's yet made. These are leaner, drier and firmer than those as I see it. And it then becomes a stylistic preference point.
You talk about it being unusual. The thing that I wrote on my notes, and I think when I look at it again here, it's got a really herbal nose, and I don't mean that herbal can be misconstrued as being lacking in freshness or dried out or whatever. That's not how I mean it. I mean herbal like garden mint that I grow in my garden in summer, and coriander. It's very, very fresh and kind of leafy and aromatic and really pretty. And the palate's very fine and kind of pinpoint folds. You know, it's not it doesn't float. It's like a pintuck that's been ironed. It's super, super precise. Really, really pretty, and again, very distinctive from a close planted vineyard. Anyhow, a beautiful wine, and we had to include it, and I'm glad that we did. I'm glad that you brought it.
Love that description of the ironing. Don't get that too often.
It's just very precise, this Pinot. This is not like a flamboyant, outgoing, extroverted Pinot. This is a really kind of directed, focused, precise Pinot.
Of great length.
Of great length. Mm. Moving into wine number 2. This is the 2018 Tolpuddle. Now, before we start talking about this specific wine, I love Tasmania. Like, I think it's a beautiful place to go, and I've fallen in love with it a couple of times over when I've been there. I also love Tasmanian wine, specifically the Pinot Noir. And to choose one Pinot from Tassie is kind of crazy because there's so many incredible Pinots, like I just can't even tell you. And the sweet spot for Tassie Pinot seems to be somewhere between $50 and $70, I reckon. There is a hell of a lot to drink in that price range. And I know that's a lot for weekday drinking, but just in terms of like great Australian wine, Tasmanian Pinot falls in that bracket, and I really love them. So I don't want you to think that Tolpuddle's the only great Pinot in Tasmania, and maybe we should do a Tasmanian Pinot tasting. In fact, I would love that because there's some really exciting things happening down there. This is just one of the greats that are produced there, and I have always loved what the Tolpuddle vineyard has produced. Well, in its in its since 2012 iteration of what it's produced. This is very, very pretty, pleasurable, soft comfort wine. It is gorgeous. It's like, it's got a really juicy, succulent, plush nose and palate. Everything is really kind of integrated and beautiful, and there's no elbows or edges. There's nothing hard in this wine. This is just lyrical beauty, I think.
Okay, so I think, having just run through a couple of these again, I think I prefer this bracket slightly to the previous bracket, and this wine typifies why. I'd find it very hard to improve on your description, and I listened very intently, and gentle, soft, textured, complete, serious length, lovely finish, lovely aftertaste, and as you said, no corners, no edges, nothing out of place. That is delicious. We have restaurants. For a restaurant wine, I think if I poured it for a person, the person would say, I'll have another glass of that, thanks. I think they'd love that.
It's silky.
Yes.
It's really like,
Yep.
Yeah, it's really got it happening. I don't think we need to say anything more about that. I was about to move on and I was like, is it hasty? But no, we've wrapped that up. I love that wine. Moving into wine number 3. So this is the 2017 Hurley Vineyards Garamond Pinot. Now, we looked at the 18 as well.
Yes.
Just to work out which one we wanted to talk about. And and here's the, here's the bottle. We loved both of these wines, but the 17 was just slightly ahead of it, I think, in that on my page, and I don't know what you wrote about it, but for me, the 18 was really beautiful and juicy and bright and fruit forward. It was quite frontal and kind of pleasurable immediately, but the 17 had all of that behind a casing of oak and spice, and it was just a little bit more restrained and a little bit more complex. And that's why I rated it slightly higher than the 18, although I loved both. What?
Your friend and follower, the Wine Tragic, recently has had the 18, I think, on Facebook, saying he absolutely loves it. The distributor in Perth, Mick Kelly, I think has chosen the 18 a little bit ahead. I find this one, the 17, a touch fuller in flavour. It has all of the length that we're looking for. It's about an $80 wine, I think. All the length we're looking for, as this one does. This one's a touch more bony, a touch more sappy, a touch less generous, and a little bit leaner, but with all the length and flavour that it needs. But for drinking at the moment, I do prefer this one by a whisker, a touch plusher, touch softer, touch gentler, a serious length, and a lovely wine, and highly recommendable also in a restaurant situation, in my view.
I think also on the nose, while the 18 has got much more pronounced kind of pomegranate, raspberry, sour cherry character, like it's much more of the red fruit spectrum for Pinot. This speaks more clearly of like licorice, like star anise, like the dried star anise that you put into curries and things, and pepper and like a coffee ground oak. So for me, this just has slightly more interest, but I'm not sure. That could be both a factor of vintage and age, because it is a year different and they do evolve quickly in their early lives. So, I mean, it's really just down to taste. We loved them both, but we only have...
I'd love to see that, where that's going to be in another year. Yeah.
You know why we could... I'm going to let you in on something a bit embarrassing, actually, but the reason why we could only do 5 wines per bracket is because I have a set of 12 of these Oregon Pinot glasses and one of them's broken, so I have 11 glasses. So we were limited to 5. So that second Hurley had to be benched, but we love it. So
pretty handy 19th man.
Pretty handy. So moving into wine number 4. This is the Bindi 2018 Block 5 Pinot. We have looked at Bindi wines before, both because we love Bindi and we love the winemaker and owner Michael Dillon, and we've really gone on about him in another video, so we don't need to do that again here. If you're curious, go to one of our Chardonnay videos. I think we talk quite a bit about him. He's great. Anyway, John, tell us, we try and work out between us who preferred wines, like it might be that I prefer this slightly ahead of John and vice versa. John really felt very strongly. I love this wine, but John went very strongly on this. Tell us what you think about this wine.
Okay, so firstly, without going too far into Michael Dillon at Gisborne in the Macedon Ranges is a very unusual character in our industry. He talks about his father's mentor, who he describes as a sage. In our industry, Michael is almost a sage. You should get onto his Facebook site or onto their website, but onto his Facebook site, where he occasionally writes essays on very sensitive and sometimes emotive, but topics that need exploring, and he tackles them very rationally in reasonably long articles, but in a very interesting and readable way. Gets enormous feedback from hundreds of people on many of his articles and that sort of stuff. Great thinker, lovely human being, passionate wine man, and then into the wines, specialising in Chardonnays and Pinots. I haven't had as many of his wines over the years as I should have, given his reputation. I know, and I haven't looked at it now because we don't prepare these, as you know, in advance, but I've read in the past Hurley saying that people like Bas Phillip or Gioconda, he's in that ilk, and in terms of imagery in Victoria and quality in Victoria. For my money, even if we disagree slightly, I like this one a lot. A touch softer, a touch fuller, a touch longer than usual. I'm assuming West Australia had a great vintage in 2018. I can only assume, seeing that some of the 18s that we've got here, that that must have been a pretty good vintage over there too. Lovely finish, lovely aftertaste. Opulent's the wrong word, but it is full flavoured, but gently full flavoured, but with a degree of restraint, but enormous length, brilliant finish, brilliant aftertaste. I really like the wine, and I could easily drink that. I was intrigued by some of the, we have Rieslings, we've done Chardonnays, a number of Chardonnays, we've done Cabernet tasting, that sort of stuff. Most of the best of those you could easily drink on their own. Most of the wines I felt in that first bracket almost needed a touch of food to bring out the best in them. I'm starting to like these ones the way they are. I could easily sit down and drink a glass of that now. I like it a lot, but I understand where you're coming from.
To clarify, I really like this wine, and you'll see in my tasting notes my thoughts on it, but there's a really nice minerally graphite character to this, and I find it in the Chardonnay as well. It's just, it's really fine. It's like a fine structure which has plush fruit hung on it, which I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it's, the tannins are kind of very sort of finely ground, sort of chalky, a little bit of grip. The acid has got like a, this might sound very strange to you, but I often think acid can be cooling in a saline sort of brine kind of way, or cooling in like a lavender floral sort of way, and that might sound a little bit weird, but this has the lavender kind of acidity to me. It's really kind of floral and pretty, and it just sits around the back of the fruit. I actually think this is a really beautiful wine. It sounds like we don't like it, but you'll read from my notes that I do. I just, if I love it, he loves it. That's where we're going. Really, really beautiful.
If any of the wines, you'd rarely hear the term ethereal to a grape variety other than Pinot. If you were going to, with a few age, see one of these 10 wines that we've looked at going into the ethereal world, I'm leaning towards this guy.
Yes.
But say if you disagree.
No, it's. I think yes, because the fruit is soft, but the acid is woven gently through it.
I agree.
This is soft, but this is much bigger.
Absolutely.
There's much more body in this Tasmanian Pinot. This is much finer. I often think Pinot is everything's preferential, right? Especially how it's made. If you like Syrah v Shiraz, or you like unoaked Chardonnay, like maybe a Chablis style that still worked, or really heavily worked oaked Chardonnay, everything's preference driven, and that's cool. There's no right answer. With Pinot, I divide them into, for my palate, into fruit driven and savoury, like not savoury, structured. So Pinots can, for me, be defined by the way that they feel, and the structure and the tannin and the grip and the length, or the fruit profile that they have. So whether they're plush and succulent and juicy, or whether they're kind of savoury and spiced and sort of leaner. And I think these are two really good examples of structural versus fruit driven. there's no right answer and there's no wrong answer either. They're both beautiful styles of Pinot. It's just about what you prefer to drink. And I think you can probably drink more of the structural because it leaves more breathing space. But the fruit-driven delivers more pleasure in the short term, I think, because it's just so appealing and beautiful. And this, for me, sits somewhere in between those two. Because I couldn't say to you this is a fruit-driven Pinot without mentioning the structure and the acidity and the tannin in this wine. And likewise, I couldn't talk about those things without the plush fruit. So I find this to be a very interesting wine.
Okay, so for me, neither of those. I want to say that Swanbourne cellars in the western suburbs in Perth, and there will be others in Western Australia as well, every year have a cross-section of the Bindi wines, and they're a lovely group of guys and I love what they do. I have great affection for them, and that came from there. This taste, as I've said in previous videos, I don't have all the wines I want myself or that Erin gets. We both bring wines into these tastings. So sometimes I just do a little trip around a few of the better wine stores in Perth. I got this one from Swanbourne Cellars and I like it a lot. And I'm feeling my way. I haven't looked at as many of the Bindi wines as I should have because I've known Michael for a long time, but I get lost in my own little world over here in the West. I reckon that's as good as I've seen. I reckon that's a great Bindi. I like that a lot. I am a big fan.
I think we're seeing that though with the new vintages that are coming through in 17 and 18. I just think have been really brilliant in their own ways. And we're just seeing some incredible wines being produced in Australia. We're very fortunate to have a bevy, an embarrassment of riches, in fact. I think Michael did work at Swanbourne Cellars for a summer.
No, he didn't.
Are you sure?
I am positive.
Did he work at Coppins?
He worked at my old wine store at John Coppins, the old wine store in Perth in Western Australia, which is how we met each other. He worked for the great wine man Paul de Bergday, but that's another story. Okay.
I was close. By about 1.8 Ks, maybe. Okay, the final wine in our lineup today is a 2018 Piketty Tete Cuvee. So this has not been released yet. So if you're a long-time lover of Piketty and the Tete, which I know many are, you won't be able to buy it for a little while, and I'm sorry for that. But it's really important that we tell you about this wine because I think that and I have to declare a bias actually before we begin. I've been writing the tasting notes for Piketty for about 6 or 7 vintages. And I'm very close with the panels, so I don't review their wines because of that. It's just not honest of me because obviously there's an emotional connection to them. But looking at their wines over the years, this 18, I can honestly tell you that in every vintage I'm more impressed with what they've done that year than I did the previous, and I really like the previous, so it's been a step up every year. But this Tete leaves the others for dead, in my opinion. This 18 is an incredible wine, and Bill Pannell said that that this is the wine he's been waiting his whole life to make. And we know the great Mosswood Cabernets he's been responsible for, the other great Piketty Pinots, some of those early Mosswood Pinots. He's got a slew of great wines in his wake, but this is the one wine that he says now I've completed it. And I think in this lineup, WA is not known for Pinot, and that's okay. We do other things really well, but the panels in Pemberton are leading the charge in WA, and that wine is in good company here.
Now, given that good company needs some parameters, how much time have I got?
Enough.
Okay, so Bill Pannell in this town is a legend. He's extraordinary. So not only has he been involved in the wineries that Erin mentioned, places like Mosswood, which he made famous, and he helped. In fact, he was the key person to make make Margaret River famous, but also heavily involved for years in the Domaine de la Pousse store in Burgundy. I think probably the first Australian to be involved in any serious winemaking over there. Bill Pannell is a great man, interested in flavour, great books, great music. He and his wife.
He's very generous as well. He's very generous as well.
He's got an extraordinary heart and extraordinary mind. Number of people in the East, some of the biggest names around, have said that Pinot Noir in Western Australia perhaps should be pulled out. It doesn't make the grade. Well, this wine is lined up against a few of the greatest Pinots in the country, and it's not shamed in any way, shape or form. Western Australia is now starting to find the clones, the plots, the way of doing it. Erin and I have done tastings recently of some great value, reasonably priced Pinot Noirs, which from Western Australia, and sub-30 mainly. Delicious, wonderful, far better than I expected, quite extraordinary. And then we come up with wines like this, the granddaddy, the patriarch, the legendary forerunner of the great Pinots in this state. Complex, alive, a myriad of flavours running through it, a little bit starker, and perhaps starker could be the wrong word. You express things better than I do, than the soft plush gentleness of this and the fine ethereal nature of this. A touch more fruit than this, but with life, length, finish, aftertaste, going to be delicious. But it's not released, and won't, as Erin said, won't be released for some time yet. The 15 is on the market in Perth. The 17 they have got on the market at Sell the Door, and they've released some to stores that are hosting tastings in Perth, so they might have a touch. And then this is the 18, which won't be released for a little while yet.
Next year, 2021.
Okay, right.
The Piketty Pinot style is structure driven. So it has a very, very clear fruit profile, which starts with strawberry. It has cherry. It doesn't really go into the raspberry pomegranate spectrum. It's not that generous. It's quite precise and fine. The estate has, if it was olive tapenade, has green olive tapenade, and the Tete Cuvee exhibits black olive tapenade. It's just the way. It's a really incredibly big wine compared to the estate. The estate's almost see-through when you look at it. It's like a dark rosé. I often, and Dan and I disagree here, so Dan panel, and I disagree because I will always put these into a decanter, because the difference between the beginning of the bottle and the end of the bottle is stark. And while I love the beginning, I really am totally in love with the end. There's something that happens to the fruit and the structure, and they just marry in a most incredible way. So if you do get your hands on some Tete, I would really recommend just putting it in a decanter, whether you vigorously decant it prior to drinking it immediately or put it in a decanter 2 hours prior. That's up to you, depends on what time you have. But it's just, we've literally opened these, poured them and gassed them again. With the Piketty, I was very tempted not to, but to give them all an even playing field. I just think the fruit is just so intense. There's so much going on there. But
you reminded me, and the expressions on my face might have been concerning to some viewers while you were talking, because I was suddenly realising that we hadn't really put this into context another way. Bill is one of the few absolute and total Francophiles in Western Australia, and was one of the earlier ones in this state. Had a magnificent cellar of French Burgundies, of which he's a great fan. He's made, and I've mentioned the Domaine de la Pusteaux, which he was involved with for many years, financially. He makes the wines traditionally. Yes. There is no deference to soft gentleness, perhaps that we see in some other wines in Australia. There's no tipping of the lid to the modern style of wine and protecting the wines from oxygen, that sort of stuff. Bill makes them in the way that he sees and the way that he has for 40 years. And 40 years ago, Bill made some of the great Pinots in Western Australia. They didn't drink necessarily deliciously when young, but at 20 and 30 years of age, 15, 20, 25 years of age, Bill opened up some of those in my presence with 15 and 20-year-old Premier Cru Burgundies. His wines lost nothing in comparison. They just age magnificently because he makes them traditionally and so well, and he's meticulous and pedantic, and does it so wonderfully. And he's got great feel and great flair.
You remember we had those, it was 86 and 87 and 85 Mosswood Pinots at Lake Caranut, and yes, they were beautiful, and I thought they were old Chevrolet. So,
and so Keith Mugford made those, his follower at Mosswood, but made them, I presume, in the same way. And so at 30 plus years of age, 30, 35 years of age, in a lineup of marvellous wines. They were, in each instance, 2 of them were the wines of the night.
Yes.
In a mask lineup, no one knew what they were. Yeah.
So the one thing I will say about Piketty is if you think that they're doing well now, if you're already a fan of their wines and you love what they're doing, they have just planted in the last 12 months a vineyard of clones that they got from Burgundy. And Bill has done this before with Chardonnay and Pinot. And when I asked Bill what clones they were, because I do like a clonal discussion, he wouldn't tell me, which is probably good for him, because if I knew, I would tell you. So Bill, if you're watching, well played. But it's a selection Marsal from a friend of theirs in, I'm not even going to tell you, a village in Burgundy. And it's all Grand Cru stuff. And so they're coming online from the 2020 vintage. They've already put bits into the Pinots, but certainly they'll be online from 2020. So that's my point, is they are ever expanding their Pinot program, which is I guess key to where they're going.
How much time have we got?
Maybe 1 minute.
In that case, Bill also, both with Pinot and Chardonnay, has been bringing clones into Western Australia for a long time, as compared to most people who don't. Bill is an innovative creator.
He is. So I know that you'll have feelings about the wines that we've chosen today. There's a lot of emotion around Pinot and who creates the best Pinot. We haven't said anyone here creates the best Pinot. We're just saying that we love what we see. These are some of Australasia's finest. If you've got feelings around what we need to be tasting, well, I'd like to know. Send them through. If you don't, you agree with what we selected, thank you very much. We like them as well. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It gives me the energy to continue doing what we do, and we love it. And we will see you at the next one.
God bless. Thanks.